So our first category is wins and losses. Those are the most important ones, and I feel like we really get away from that in the modern age of college football with the college football playoff and the way that it's worked out for the past couple of seasons. Um, Basically, if you are undefeated at the end of a regular season, you get 1,000 points automatically. Like if you're 13-0 after your conference championship, it's 1,000 points.
So it's basically like wins and losses are important, but the biggest thing that we're taking away is the win percentage, when your win loss percentage. So your win ratio is basically if you're undefeated, you're going to have a 1.0000 repeating forever. And that is determines basically that you're just an undefeated team. You didn't lose to anybody. Um, we basically took that number and said, okay, you earn 1,000 points. So a team that's like maybe 12-1, they are, they have a win percentage of point nine something, something really high. Like it's a really high percentage. That basically gets times win percentage gets times by 1,000, and then it gives you the answer that you're looking for in terms of how many points. I would love to use our ranking system and do all the rankings for previous seasons when we get the time and availability to do that, because I want to kind of prove how
Yeah.
wrong the committee has gotten it wrong for almost a decade. Because this committee's terrible. It's all subjective. So this first part is going to be the moneymaker. These wins and losses, the win percentage, that's the moneymaker. That's the one that gives you the most points. And we're going to be honest about that right from the beginning.
So then our second category is points for versus points against, which is basically our style points for the most part because it's simplifying style points. They're not throwing other little things in between. Like we thought about including like turnovers and all these other little stats, but when it came down to it, we decided that points for versus points against at the end of the season is really all you need because all of the stuff that would be mentioned anyways contributes to both of those.
The important thing about the points for and points against is the differences, like Greg called it the style points. I wanted to also clarify that we're not just giving people the points that they earned, because there's a couple reasons for that. One, when you start dealing with negatives, it's really like it becomes a problem with math. Like I'm not saying that we can't do negatives, but but like let's just say for example, the team's like below 500, they're already not getting a lot of points because they're below 500. They get negative points. So what's even worse about that is that the points that they get when they're negative means that they go down even further to start being lower. So that could really trounce somebody. And I also noticed this too is that points for, points against, the hard part about that category is you have teams like Oregon's a great example for this, or Washington. Actually, the Pac-12 is a fantastic example of this, and so is the MAC. They have high-powered offenses, like the MAC and the Pac-12 are very big at scoring a lot of points, and usually they tend to have bizarre games where it's like this should be a tight matchup and it should be good, and then like Oregon will just look at like Cal and be like, yeah, 45-2. It just like blows their teams out. So like if we do those, a lot of times you'll see Oregon like lose really really tight close games, but then have astronomically high like games where they blow teams out of proportion, and so they get like a ton of points. And so if we give them that flat amount of points, it can really just drastically change a team's performance and kind of sneak them up to a higher ranking than they probably don't really deserve, in my humble opinion. So to make it the most fair, what we did was if you are the top team in the nation, we gave you 133 teams or 133 points because there's 133 teams. So if you're number 133, you get 1 point. And that's how the points for and points against differential works in this section, which helps us like really clean up everything, because now we know in this category the best team will only get 133 points, and it also will not supersede necessarily the point different or the wins and losses, which we want to make very clear is the most important part of this. So we have a tier system already starting to be fleshed out as you can see this going into place.
Now we're going to talk about our third and, well, not final category, but it is for the regular season, which is strength of schedule. And I mean, we did the basic thing where we took all of the records of the people that they faced throughout the season and just kind of tallied up. Like, it's the same thing as the last category, the way we rank them. So if you have the best strength of schedule in the season, you get 133 points. So that's just a nice little boost to people who really decided to go out and schedule tough opponents. And I feel like that's one of the things that is really, really well needed in modern college football, because there's not a lot of incentive to play tough opponents right now.
This is actually the most important and well talked about part of this entire category. And I know it's not necessarily the most important in terms of points in numbers, but it's truly the most important because we have gotten strength of schedule wrong for generations. I'm not even talking decades. I'm not even talking years. I'm talking straight up generations, yo. Like, we have not gotten this category right at all. The biggest way that we have determined strength of schedule is based upon how many ranked teams you faced. And that is a terrible, subjective, and invalid way of doing that. Because based on ranked teams will not actually tell you the full story of how tough your opponents were throughout the season. Let's just take, for example, I don't know, Miami versus Texas A&M this season. Miami wasn't even ranked. Texas A&M was in the top 25 the first season. Where did both of those teams end up this season? Oh, that's right. They were in the middle of the pack, 7-5 teams. Like, didn't do diddly squat all season long. Yet, Miami's most effective and most powerful game that they can argue that they won was against a ranked opponent. So now, if Miami was in contention of anything, which they weren't this season, so it's a bad example, good example kind of analogy, they all of a sudden have an argument going, hey, we beat a ranked team this year. Wait a minute, we beat a ranked team this year. And that's how the committee and how college football has looked at it for so long. Is that you look at based upon who was your ranked opponents this year and how many ranked opponents did you have and how many wins did you earn on those ranked opponents. That is a bad way of doing it. It doesn't make any sense. It's immensely subjective, and it only is predicated on the idea that we got the ranking system right at the beginning of the season, which, by the way, you don't. You start off by ranking Texas A&M, who has done nothing the season beforehand doing anything. You rank Ole Miss way high up there for no reason. They proved off this year doing all right, but you start them off ranked. Why? Why do we start the teams ranked off in a certain way and then project that that's the way to go? LSU was ranked in the top 10 this season and lost 3 games. Why? Why are we constantly going off of that strength of schedule when it's subjective and pointless when they can't keep the rankings that they start off with? That's the problem with the ranking system. So if you want a true analysis of a strength of schedule, you got to go back to my favorite thing to talk about all the time, wins and losses. That is the only objective, effective way to describe a strength of schedule. If your opponent's combined wins and losses were really high, that means you had a really good and tough strength of schedule. If your teams that you faced were all mediocre, middle of the ballpark, you didn't have a strong strength of schedule, which is a big reason why I'm not upset that Liberty didn't make it to the Final Four. Liberty sucked when it came to strength of schedule. They faced nobody, and that makes a lot of sense. But teams that objectively, in the minds of commentators, sports anchors, and a whole bunch of other people that are in the top that know football better than everybody else, will argue the opposite. They will argue, oh, this is a strong team because they face this team. You got to prove it. You got to prove it with the numbers. And the numbers don't always back what the sports anchors and commentators say. They just don't. This category is immensely based off of the wins and losses differential of all of your opponents combined at the end of the season. That's how that's determined. So
That's a good segue into our conference. The last thing we're going to do is show you the differences between our Wise Fools rankings and the college football playoffs rankings at the end of the regular season, which we also include the conference championships with that, as we explained earlier with the way our numbers work. Florida State makes it in instead of Alabama. And Alabama is just on the outside looking in. So here's the way the top 25 runs down: is Michigan's 1, Washington's 2, Florida State, Texas, and Alabama. That wraps up the top 5 right there. And obviously it's different from what you guys watched in the college football playoff, so I don't really need to explain that too much. And then we have a very surprising team if you go off of the college football playoffs rankings, which is Liberty at number 6. And like Zecki said earlier, Liberty, even though they were undefeated, and we prioritize wins over everything else. They had a crappy strength of schedule. They faced nobody the entire season. So sorry, Liberty, you just didn't have anything to show for that, and so the points worked against you in that way.
No, a lot of people are going to probably get super pissed off that Liberty is ahead of Georgia, especially after the showing that they did against Oregon. Again, this is objective. This is immensely objective. And the reason why that matters is because we have a messed up system right now. And even with our ranking system, it's going to be weird. It's going to be crazy weird because Liberty didn't face anybody. They didn't face anybody hard. And that put them up where they probably didn't deserve. And getting a smackdown from Oregon really described that. But I would much rather have this than what we have now, where it's completely made up in factual. For example, we are so fixated about the Power 5, and we're not even about the Power 5 anymore, because when you can snub Florida State the way you did and basically just shit all over the ACC, there's no more Power 5 talk anymore. We got rid of that this year. They decided to even double down and go, well, it's either North or South, Big Ten, or SEC. Anything else is a bust, and I don't want to talk about it. That's where we're at now. And that's where it goes. And you can see it. You can see it right here, the way they have it on their ranking system. Big Ten, Pac-12 Washington. Oh, I'm just kidding. It's Big Ten. Big 12 Texas. No. That's SEC. Alabama, SEC. Georgia, SEC. Big Ten, SEC. Big Ten, SEC. Big Ten, SEC. I don't know where Arizona's going. And then
Big 12.
And then I'm not talking about Florida State because Florida State's in the 5th here. But then before we get to our next conference that's not Big Ten and SEC, we have ACC in 15th. This is what they want. This is what makes them happy. This is what makes them satisfied with their ranking system. And that is garbage. Because there is no way that you can justify a 133 league team with 2 conferences represented in the top 10. Just 2.
Yeah.
Excluding Florida State, who's trying to get away from the ACC right now as well. That's frustrating. That shouldn't be. If it really is that way, then we should only have 2 conferences. Everyone, just throw everybody in the hat and say, North, South, conferences, done. That's the way they want it, then that's the way it's got to be. But I hate this, and I don't think it's fair. So the way we made it fair, and besides the way we talked about the analytics of it, is that we made it fair. Look at the variety. Big 10, Pac-12, ACC, Big 12, SEC, Conference USA, SEC, Big 10, Sun Belt, AAC, MAC, Sun Belt, AAC, SEC. We, you know what I'm saying? We put SEC up there, we put Big 10 up there, but how many other conferences did I just say? I don't know, 7? 7 conferences? That's the talking point. That's what matters.
Yeah.
That's the importance. Right there.
Yeah, barely. And I think in the top 25 for our rankings, all conferences are represented.
The point I'm trying to say is that we have every team represented in a conference. And that's the way it should be. It just should be that way. Now, in this situation, I don't care that a best of 5 team makes it in the top 12 because I know they're going to. When an 11-2 team makes it, man, that's an 11-2 team. How can you say no to that? How? How can you fairly say no to that? There is no arbitration. We are just letting the gridiron determine the best teams. And I think that is the most fair, objective way you can conduct yourselves. Found the bad seed in college football, and it's the committee, and it's this stupid judging project, this think tank that we have that determines what happens to our favorite teams. I'm done. It's over. Let's stop thinking that way. This is our ranking system. This is what we're going to stand by. This came from us. I don't even necessarily care if you come up with some similar and go and put your name on it. Matters to me is that it changes the way we look at college football. That college football changes, hopefully even by next year. That would be amazing. I don't think it's going to change next year. There's too many things in place. But if we can get rid of this committee, if we can get back to civility with allowing 133 teams the chance to make it to a national championship, that's my thing. If you're ranked 133, you should have an equal chance to make it to the national championship game just as much as the number 1 team.
All right, well, thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you liked it, hit the like button. But I encourage you, if you don't, hit the dislike button and leave us a comment of why you didn't like it. Maybe you didn't like the ranking system. Maybe you didn't like our opinions. I mean, that's the chance we take by putting our opinions on the internet, on YouTube. So, yeah, we're here to interact with you guys and trying to figure out the best system possible, because this is just from us. This is from our 2 brains and all of our experience we have with watching college football. I'd like to hear some more opinions. Bash on it or love it or tell us what just your opinions. We'll see you next time, and thank you so much.